Welcome back, guys, to the last lesson, lesson 4, and the level 3 award in supporting teaching and learning in schools. I'm Vicky, and we're moving on to the final one, understanding how to safeguard the well-being of children and young people. So in this video, we will be talking about some maybe quite upsetting things. So a little bit of a warning on areas of safeguarding that will be discussed. So just make sure that you're in a suitable environment to view and that you are in that kind of reflective mood where you can take on this information. Just feel free to do it in bits at a time if that's better for you. There will be a fourth assignment as well, of course, but that will be your final one. So we're looking at potential risks to children and young people and how to respond to safeguarding concerns, which unfortunately is a really important part of your role. What do you know already about safeguarding? So have a think. Do you know what you would do if a child or young person came to you with a concern? How would you report it? Who would you go to? So make sure, at the very least, that you know that. You may be new, you may not have started in this other school where you'd like to go for a job. So this is not a blame thing, but it's something to make sure that you know straight away. And I'm sure as part of your induction, it will be made very clear. So safeguarding is making the setting that you work in safe for the children that you're working with and the set of policies that go with that and procedures. Child protection is protecting all children in the world, making the world safe. So that's something that you cannot control. So child safeguarding sits within child protection, and that's the Save the Children's definition. You will need to be aware of quite a lot of legislation in this section. So you've got some listed there. You don't obviously need to read the whole thing. I would urge you to go back through the video, through the slides, um, and look at the links here. So look at the tragic national cases, which again is upsetting reading, but it's really important. And then in response to that, what were the reforms that were made? And if you click on that reforms link in the slides, you will be able to read that too. And I will make that available in the pack. Um, there was a really important act in 2017, the Children and Social Work Act. And it meant that a lot of things were put in place after a couple of these very upsetting national tragic events, which ended fatally for the children and young people involved. There's now a child safeguarding practice review panel. Local authorities must notify this panel of events which are really serious. And there are local multi-agency safeguarding partners, including the police as well, and they must report every 12 months. So it gives you quite a good feeling about how high profile these cases are now. However, as we know, tragically, there are cases that still slip through the net. You must have read part one and Annex A from Keeping Children Safe in Education. And if you work in a school or a college, you will probably have to do this as a matter of course and do some online training about this at regular intervals. But the main points are summarized here if you take time to read those. Okay, so very important for you to know these things. So not only if a child reports a concern to you, but if they're disclosing something specific about abuse or neglect, do you know who your designated safeguarding lead is? Um, do you you could report it straight to social care, but the DSL has to know, so you have to go through the procedure. Um, Also, FGM, female genital mutilation, has to be reported to the police, but report it first to the DSL. But then you must make sure that that has been reported to the police. Every concern needs to be reported in writing. And if it's a staff member, that is really difficult, but make sure you say something. We'll come on to whistleblowing in a bit, but it's always imagine how you would have felt if you hadn't said something and something had happened. So it's sometimes those gut feelings can be very true. So take all of this very seriously, of course, write it all down, share it with the right people. But then it's not up to you what happens next. You know, you've passed it on to the right people, they will now deal with it. Sometimes a serious case review is needed with some of those high profile cases that we all remember reading about or seeing on the news. And the agencies involved, hopefully all working together in safeguarding children and young people. Safeguarding responsibilities. So it is everybody's responsibility. You've got the designated safeguarding leads, but it is the buck stops with everybody. Okay. There's a requirement in the Education Act for schools to safeguard children. Um, and Ofsted, I'm sure everybody's heard of schools failing Ofsteds purely on a safeguarding issue when other areas were pretty good because safeguarding is so central. So the kind of things that we're looking for, and when I say looking for, obviously we don't want to find them, but these are things that we need to be aware of. So recognizing when someone is vulnerable to being targeted by extremist groups, and this is particularly with older teenagers, but not always. Something to think about there with prevent. And again, you probably will have regular prevent training online too. Child sexual exploitation and child criminal exploitation. Again, you would think it would be the older children, but we would be surprised by how young some of the children are that are involved in things like county lines. Um, Grooming, this can happen with trusted family members that the children and young person knows, or it could be that it's a new person they've met potentially online or wherever, and they're being groomed to gain their trust. Forced marriage, and then female genital mutilation, which is illegal here, but it's not stopping young girls being taken overseas to have that done. So those are particularly some factors that we're looking for when we think about safeguarding. Also, bullying, and these might be the ones that perhaps you see more of on a day-to-day basis. We know that children often will say, I'm being bullied, and we'll come on to bullying later. And of course, we know it's a repetitive pattern in person or online, and it causes significant harm. Self-harm and self-neglect always needs to be flagged up. And then child on child abuse obviously needs to be taken seriously also. So please watch this NSPCC signs of abuse video. Very, very useful. Make some notes. So go back and have a look at that in your own time. Some potential signs of abuse or neglect, which is always very tricky because some children will become very withdrawn. Some children will suddenly start being really extrovert. Really, what you're looking for is a change in behavior, often a very sudden change. Is there something different about their appearance? Thinner, dirty? Are they very anxious suddenly for no good reason? Are they running away? So you should always go to your designated safeguarding lead. Of course, if they're in immediate danger, then you go to the police and definitely about FGM. However, you then need to inform that you've done that to your designated safeguarding lead and obviously follow the system the school or college has put in place. If you're confided in, it can put you in a very difficult position. And I'm sure it may has happened already, and it unfortunately probably will happen. It's very important what you say next. So be calm, deep breath, reassure them that they've done the right thing. I need to take notes. I will need to write this down because what you're saying is really important, but I will only tell the people that need to know, but I must share it with other people. I'm going to write down exactly what you say. I'm not going to write down anything else. So I'm not going to have any of my bias in there. I'm not going to ask you any questions. I'm not going to try and give you advice. And I will then have to pass this on to the designated safeguarding lead. You know, if it's an emergency, you'd contact the police. And then don't worry after that. Obviously, you'll want to find out what's happened and follow it up because you're a human being and a good person. But the other people involved will now make the decisions. It could be that it's concern about an adult that you're working with, and this could be someone you know well, or it could be someone that's just sort of come in as a volunteer or a new member of staff. There will be a whistleblowing policy, so read it and make sure you know to go through the steps and protect yourself. So definitely social media is a big one. Um, we should all know that it would be really inappropriate to be following any of the children or friends with them or whatever language is appropriate on social media. Um, and maintaining that distance. And sometimes with a teaching assistant role, you are quite friendly. They see you as their friend. They really trust you, but it's very important to have that distance between you. And of course, never say, yes, I'll keep that a secret. So moving on to bullying, as I said, we would um, repeated behavior. So that's really, really important. So it can't be something that's happened once, maybe twice. It's got to be repeated. And the NSPCC list these types of bullying. So have a quick look at that. How does it affect people? You may have been a victim of this. You may have had family that have been a victim of this, and it may have happened to you as an adult or to them. Certainly, it can lead to mental health problems and social difficulties and just falling behind in school, unable to focus, because they don't want to go in if you're being bullied at school. And at worst, these can have really serious consequences, of course. The signs of bullying, there's a list here which is useful. If you have a gut feeling that something's wrong, you might want to refer to this list and think, actually, yes, their stuff's always being moved around, or they've got some injuries that are difficult to explain, or they don't want to explain. Their attendance is dipping. There's a change in their grades. They need money. The behavior changes again, similar to the signs of neglect or abuse. Um, and actually, the last one, bullying others, certainly, certainly for younger children as well, it's your way of kind of asserting some control of the situation. Every school must have an anti-bullying policy by law, which sets out what you would adhere to. So again, make sure you've read it and make sure you know what you would be doing in that situation. Just like the child disclosing the concern, the safeguarding concern, they must know it's not their fault. They've done the right thing. There is a system in place, and we are going to be able to help them. And the bullies will be dealt with. Of course, we'd all like an ideal world where there's no bullying. So the Anti-Bullying Alliance have these 10 key principles, and it might be useful to share these with other members of staff if these aren't known widely within your school or setting. So number one, listen. To inclusion. So really tackling those children who, remembering that we had the fact about children with disability who are much less satisfied with their general school life, social life, or can be less satisfied. So including them as well. Respect everybody, challenge everything. So often you might see things fly under the radar. They've made a comment, was that slightly racist or was that slightly ableist? Actually, if we know that we're working in an environment where that will be challenged, it turns it on its head sometimes. Celebrating difference, lots of schools do this really, really well with assemblies and different festivals being celebrated, but all sorts of differences being celebrated all the time. Understanding, um, believing, so you're taken seriously, and if you are going to go to a teaching assistant or a teacher, you will be taken seriously. Everyone knows how to report it, everyone knows how to take action, and there are clear policies. So I think this is very useful to share if it's not already out there in your school or college. How do we build self-esteem? Every child needs their self-esteem building, but especially if you've been a victim of bullying, you're going to need it. How do you do this at the moment? Do you have any strategies that you use to build the self-esteem of the people that you work with? Um, do you challenge their negative thoughts? Do you focus on the positives? Do you recognize what they're good at? Do you set yourself small challenges? Do you get them to be kind? Do you do these for yourself? That's really important to consider. Do you recognize what you're good at? Do you set yourself those challenges? And are you kind to yourself? Because we can be so hard on ourselves. And actually, we would never do that to the children and the young people that we work with. So if you're modeling that, that can be really useful for them. Helping them to build their resilience, positive relationships, understanding their emotions, taking on challenges, managing their stress. Again, if you're modeling this and if you're talking about this, it can really, really help. Helping them to set their goals, belief in themselves, and what's different and unique about them. Is there a culture of talking about making positive choices? Can you have open conversations with the children and young people that you work with? PSHE or circle time or life skills are always good sessions to do that. Talk about different choices and how they might go. Of course, there's always an element in all of this about online risks. So we need to consider their exposure to obviously smartphones and other devices, social media. We're not their parents when we're educating them. We can only advise and give them opportunities to talk about anything they're worried about, give them the online safety guidance, encourage them to do other activities, and use mistakes online as learning opportunities. They are all going to do something stupid online, particularly teenagers. Are they confident enough to say, yeah, this is where I went wrong and I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to learn from it. Right. So you've come to the very end. You've come to assignment four. There are three case studies that are all slightly different in terms of safeguarding and children and young people making disclosures to the trusted member of staff. So in each one, what would you do? Within your own workplace policy, what are the steps that you would take and the system that you have to follow? So make sure that you are thinking about your own workplace, even if the age of the person involved is slightly different to who you would be working with. So good luck with that. I want to hear what you would do in your workplace and how you would tackle it. And if you're following the procedure, there's no wrong answers. You will be right. And of course, put in that bit of empathy on how you would sit down with that young person. How would you reassure them? Go through all of it. Okay, make it come alive. And thank you so much for listening to all four lessons and taking part. And I look forward to seeing all of your work. Thank you very much.